Hello and welcome. I'm Tamara Anderson from Building Successful Lives Speech and Language Services. Today I have another excellent guest. I have Dr. Lauren McClenney-Rosenstein from Think Dyslexia. I'm very pleased to have her as a guest on my literacy channel and about literacy, diversity, inclusion, and equity. And today she's going to be talking about equity, literacy, instruction, and special education. And she is an advocate for bringing awareness to dyslexia at the domestic and international levels. And she has an extensive experience working in private schools with children with language-based learning disabilities. She has been certified to teach special education with different diverse learners for the past decade. And she earned her doctorate in education in teaching, learning, leadership, and curriculum in 2019 from Northeastern University. And she holds a dual master's in special education and elementary education from Syracuse University. She also has a bachelor's degree in psychology from Syracuse University. She's truly dedicated to providing the gold standard of instruction to individuals with dyslexia. And she obtained her endorsement at the associate level through the Orton-Gillingham Academy in 2014. She has taught in the public schools in the middle grade, 7th and 8th grade, with children with learning disabilities. So thank you so much, Dr. Lauren. And she's currently a middle school specialist and instructional coach at a private school in the Maryland area. So welcome, very pleased to have you today.
Thank you so much for that amazing introduction. I didn't realize I was gonna get my bio read. I love it. Thank you.
I truly enjoy highlighting different professionals because I know we have a lot of training and expertise, and I definitely don't ever want to minimize that. So thank you so much. And being a speech language pathologist, I work a lot with children with language-based learning disabilities who truly struggle with literacy. And we know literacy has the 4 domains of listening, comprehension, speaking, reading, and writing, and all those really work hand in hand, which is why I invited you on to talk today, because I know that you focus a lot with children with dyslexia. So I'd love for you to talk more about the components of structured literacy intervention and why is this so important to address all the areas when providing quality reading instruction for children with learning disabilities and dyslexia?
Sure. So there are 6 components to structured literacy. And so there's phonology, which is the study of sound and structure of spoken words. And that's really understanding the rhyming, counting, spoken speech. There's sound to symbol association. And so that is really understanding the visual and auditory reading component. There's the syllable instruction. So there are 6 different syllable types that it's really critical for students to understand that as well. There's morphology, which is the smallest unit of meaning in language. And also you can delve into that with base words and root words and prefixes and suffixes. There's also syntax, which I know you're probably very familiar with that as being a speech language pathologist, but grammar and understanding the sentence variations and the mechanics of language. And then there's semantics, and that's really the reading comprehension aspect to written language. And so when you have all 6 of those components, it's really important to apply those to the dyslexic brain because, as we know, it's a neurological brain-based learning difference or disability, depending on how a dyslexic person wants to be identified. Sometimes they say learning difference, sometimes they prefer learning disability. But it really depends on how their brain is wired. And so if you take a typical brain versus a dyslexic brain, you'll see different areas light up differently. And so it's our job as interventionalists to get those neurons firing in various different ways. And that's why structured literacy works, because it's all the 6 different components and they're explicitly taught so the students know how to connect all of them to really get the brain firing and making those connections for a deeper understanding.
Yes, I think that is so critical because as a speech language pathologist, we know how important it is to provide intervention for children with language delay and then receptive and expressive language disorder. And that really goes in hand because so many children with language disabilities and so forth, they truly have a reading disability and some of them truly have the characteristics of dyslexia. And I know as a speech pathologist, we touch on all those different areas, phonology, morphology, syntax, and semantics in our intervention from a different angle. So I appreciate you sharing that information with my audience. What are some of the important features, Dr. Lauren, of the Orton-Gillingham approach? I know here in Atlanta, there are some special education teachers that are trained in that, more so in the private schools, some in the public schools, but I'd love for you to just touch specifically about, those particular features.
So I will say I started my career in a private dyslexic school in Atlanta. So shout out to Swift School. That was where I first heard about Orton-Gillingham, and I was properly trained with the gold standard with an Orton-Gillingham fellow. I would say a few things to point out. The fact that the academy is an accrediting body is huge. It's not, the actual academy does not go into school districts and do training, which makes it a little bit difficult for people to get certified. You are trained with an Orton-Gillingham fellow, and every person that's in the academy can be traced back to their fellow, which is amazing. So if you're meeting someone in California or someone even worldwide in Canada, you can actually say who is a fellow that you train with, and it's all within the academy. Another important thing to recognize that's really different from the actual Orton-Gillingham Academy versus other offshoots that say they do OG training is the fact that the Orton-Gillingham Academy requires a practicum. And so it's not just 60 hours of training or X amount of hours of training. Yes, that's critical, but you have to apply that knowledge you're learning. And so when you're taking that information and you're going out in the field and you're doing maybe your small group testing, or small group code groups and one-on-one groups, it's really critical to have a fellow check in, walk you through, make sure that you're actually applying the things that you're learning. So I think those are some amazing features that make the Orton-Gillingham Academy so unique, and really that gold standard, which is difficult for the average person to just say, we hear the buzzword, I'm OG trained, but did you go through the academy? And that's a major difference.
Exactly. And that's part of why I invited you on today, because definitely working in public school setting as well as private practice, I know there's a variety of literacy programs out there. And I know Orton-Gillingham is definitely one of the gold standards, definitely. And it's very different if you go and get the training specifically through the academy, as opposed to just a one-day seminar that might just not even be a full day, right? It's
right.
You have your certification in a different level. So I definitely appreciate you highlighting that for the audience as well. What do you see are the main benefits of using the Orton-Gillingham approach for students with special education needs? And we know every child learns differently, whether they have learning disability, ADHD, dyslexia. So what are really the benefits that you have found from your observation with using this particular OG method?
Well, the Orton-Gillingham approach is exactly that. It's an approach, it's a methodology. So we want to definitely debunk any sort of myth that this is a program. Mm-hmm. When you are looking for someone who can talk speak freely about the Orton-Gillingham method, if you hear program or curriculum, you know that they did not go through the academy. And the approach is tailored to the student. So there are 12 components to the Orton-Gillingham, there are 12 principles within the Orton-Gillingham Academy. So I will read them off to you. They are personalized, which we know each lesson has to be tailored to the student. Multisensory is huge, and that's probably one of the big things that everyone who thinks of Orton-Gillingham, they go straight to the multisensory approach. It's diagnostic and prescriptive. So that really depends on where that student is and how you can prescribe where we should go. It's direct instruction. That's one thing that I feel that I've used, where I actually explain rules explicitly to students and it makes sense, rather than, more than often, some teachers just don't know the rules. So they'll say, oh, just sound it out, or oh, just skip over that word, because they don't have the tools to really know how to break that down. There's systematic phonics, there's applied linguistics, linguistic competence, systematic and structured, as we know, very structured, sequential, incremental, and cumulative. And so we're always spiraling back, even if there are things where we know with dyslexic learners and neurodiverse learners as well, you have to repeat things, and you need to hear the repetition several times to really commit that to long-term memory. There's a continuous feedback and positive reinforcement, and that's really, I feel, with your fellow. You can check in, you can get that feedback, and also the students get that too with that tutor or that teacher. There's a cognitive approach. And then lastly, it's emotionally sound. So if you're finding that your student is hitting a wall, maybe you tailor it back. You go back to that diagnostic and prescriptive approach where you say, okay, maybe this is too much. Maybe I have 5 digraphs and I should just focus on 2 right now. We always want to make sure that kids are walking away feeling like their egos are protected and they're making progress, because progress is progress. So I feel like the 12 principles I've seen in many different ways in my 10 years of working with Orton-Gillingham, but also being certified in the last 6 or 7 years, these principles definitely show up more than often.
I think that's excellent. And I think it's important to know that you said not program, but this approach is definitely research-based and it has all the different components to it. So it's very important that parents who are looking for specific skilled intervention, that of course the OG, approach is definitely very good, very good to remediate children that have language-based learning disabilities, but specifically dyslexia. So,
right.
What professional resources do you provide, Dr. Lauren, related to dyslexia and Orton-Gillingham?
So number one, the Orton-Gillingham website, that's always a great source, because I know I'm always going to direct people to that website, not any other offshoot, just because gold standard, I'm in the academy, that's the go-to place. IDA, International Dyslexia Association, is huge. I mean, that's a great resource where I know during the pandemic, they had some free webinars they were actually offering for parents and teachers to kind of figure out how can we navigate through this space. And they're just a great resource in general, and they're global. There's also the Yale Center for Dyslexia and Creativity. And so that if you're well-versed in this community, you know the name Sally Shaywitz. So doctors, husband and wife, I can't remember what her husband's name is, but the Shaywitz, they run that clinic, I believe, and they do the research at Yale. So that's always a great credible source. The Mayo Clinic is a great one. That's where you can get early indicators at different stages, before school, like preschool, in school age, adult age. So it really breaks it down. I've actually taken their research and created some posts for that on my Instagram account. And then some other ones are understood.org. That is, it's very teacher and parent friendly. And then also there is some research that's cited at the bottom. So if you want to kind of go down that rabbit hole and figure out where they got their research from, I think that that's a credible site. Readingrocket.org is a great one. I know that Louisa Moats has been, quoted or has some articles on there as well. And lastly, I have to plug my YouTube channel, Think Dyslexia Network. So that is where I actually interview professionals in the field. I interview adults with dyslexia, and it's just a great resource to kind of hear stories and cultural differences and what professionals are doing out there to help students with learning-based language differences.
I think that's fantastic, because there are so many children and families that have, children that have and adolescents that have dyslexia and have those characteristics. And it's very important. I know with my experience working in the public school system, a lot of times those needs are not met, unfortunately. Right. They are met to a certain level, but then when they have a classroom of 10 learners or 15 learners, teachers are doing the best that they can to provide intervention. And then that's why I do private therapy to work on language remediation, but that's still something that's missing, right? Like you said, the Orton-Gillingham method is very particular, and it has the different structures that tap into the phonology, morphology, all those different components, but it's very specific. So I think that's fantastic. The information that you're sharing on your website and your YouTube channel and all of that, I think that's fantastic that you're sharing that information. And I will include all that information in my blog write-up. And I just love that you're very motivated to provide education and advocacy for children and families and adolescents, because we know that dyslexia can really impact a variety of other areas as well. So I just think that's fantastic. What do you think is your true motivation to provide the advocacy and the education to children and families and professionals?
Well, I have to say, I went into special education because I wanted to understand the way I learned. So while I am not dyslexic, I was actually diagnosed later in life, my senior year of college, with ADHD, and it opened up my world and it made a lot of sense. I was like, wow, this is why school was challenging, but I loved school. And I was always that social butterfly, and I was always in and out of my seat. And I knew that I had ideas, but I just couldn't figure out how it worked for me. And so when I went into special ed, I said, this is where I need to be, because I understand learners that learn differently, because that was me. And so I think with dyslexia, because I started my career there in a private dyslexic school, that's where my focus was. That's where my expertise came. And as I was navigating through the now, this is my 11th year of being an educator, I realized the need. So when I left, I was in 2 specialized private schools at the elementary level for the first 4 years of my career. And then when I went into public school, that's when I realized, like, oh my goodness, we are not saying dyslexia. Teachers have no idea how to identify it. Why is it not on the IEP? And that was when I really realized this is a need. This is an area of weakness that we need to talk about, and that, you know, someone's got to be passionate about it. And given that I have that experience, I'm not just a parent of a dyslexic and I'm fighting for the cause, which, don't get me wrong, we need that, but we also need educators in the field who understand it to really move the needle. So that kind of drives my passion.
I think that's fantastic. And I know you're in Maryland and I'm here in Atlanta and Georgia, and I know every state has their own legislation.
Right.
So I would definitely encourage parents and educators and speech pathologists to really look into the dyslexia laws and just different special education law state to state. And as far as IDA law for special education is across the board, right? Those are national guidelines and so forth. But as far as dyslexia, there's different things that impact each state. So I encourage every therapist and educator to look into those particular things for their state. And I know here in Georgia, we typically do not diagnose dyslexia in the public school system. I'm not saying it cannot be, right. It's not something that happens. It's listed as specific learning disability, and the teachers do the best that they can to, you know, remediate all those different principles: reading, decoding, reading fluency, reading comprehension. And the speech language pathologists do their part. And then a lot of parents seek private therapy, whether it's from a speech pathologist who's trained in literacy. I have my reading endorsement, which is a different, different level of training that's different from specific dyslexia training, and reading assessment and reading therapy from a different approach. Right. Coaches out there, but I definitely think it's fantastic that you have the training in the Orton-Gillingham, and I think that can lend itself to a lot of specific niche with a lot of families and really make an impact there. So I think that's fantastic that you're providing that information. What tips do you have for speech language pathologists or educators that want to learn more about dyslexia, or your resources? I know you said they can go to your website. Do you have any other guiding principles that you would share?
Or say that again?
Or next steps.
Yeah, I mean, I think really understanding what dyslexia is like the first place where I would start. And I know it sounds very basic, and you and I are in this field and we understand what's incorporated in that, but I also feel like there are some folks out there who just don't know. And so I think those resources that I provided in my previous questions are a great place to start. But if you want a deeper dive, maybe read some literature, so maybe some research articles, or there are some reads that are on, I think, the Yale Center for Dyslexia page, where Dr. Shaywitz has written books, Overcoming Dyslexia. I know there's the Dyslexic Advantage, which I can't remember the author's name at the moment, but there are tons of books out there that can really help you unpack the research behind it. And if you're not a big reader, pop on an audio book or watch some videos online. I mean, I'm sure there are some courses out there, but I think really, really, really understanding what it is, and not just, it's poor reading and poor writing. It involves a social emotional component that really can impact the trajectory of someone's life if it's not caught early, or if it's not understood. So, I mean, I really truly believe that in order for us to move the needle, we've got to deeply understand. And I will say that I have chatted with adults where they've said, I had an early intervention when I was 7, and they're successful entrepreneurs, versus, someone who was diagnosed in their 40s and didn't know what was going on and dropped out of high school. So there's so many different ways of understanding. It's not just a reading, writing issue. Yes, that's a huge component, but there are other things that affect our self-esteem and how we can be fully functioning adults in society and contribute and feel like we're contributing as well.
Definitely. And I would say it can definitely, having a reading disability or dyslexia can definitely contribute into the social-emotional needs, and then academically, can they graduate high school, go to vocational school? And we know that they can be successful, right? If they have the right tools and intervention, and a therapist and an interventionist such as yourself that's trained in the OG method, then they can really make improvements in a great way, which is fantastic,
Yes.
So just wanted to have you on there just to give an overview of Orton-Gillingham, just a little short snippet. And definitely, you have extensive information on your website and so forth about the Orton-Gillingham method. So just a little introduction for the folks that listen to my website and so forth on my YouTube channel. Any other parting words that you'd like to share, Dr. Lauren?
Well, I just want to say, I always really have a lot of respect for speech language pathologists. I think you guys are underappreciated. I feel like there's so many things that you all do that we don't realize. And I just want to thank you for your work. And I'm always interested in connecting with speech language pathologists. So thanks so much for asking me to come on.
You are very welcome. And I will list some additional resources. I actually have that Overcoming Dyslexia book on my table over there.
Oh, great. Great.
That you mentioned. So I will also just, highlight a couple of those at the end of this blog when I feature it. And thank you so much. You have a fantastic day.
You too.